Jesus grows up in a matter of 3 days. So we've only just had the baby Jesus. Now we've got Jesus running around the temple as a young boy. Next week we'll be a bit shocked again because we go right back again to Jesus being a baby. So, if you feel a little schizophrenic or a little bit out of sorts with it all, please understand that that's just the way that the lectionary grows and grows. Challenges for us here to understand this child. Whenever I read this passage, it reminds me of getting lost. I got lost with my mum shopping at Lewisham's shopping centre when I was about 4 or 5. I used to love to hide in and out and play between the racks. They used to have, not so much set up nowadays like they are, they would put racks of clothes in the middle of the shopping aisle and the super or whatever departmental store. They weren't the big departmental stores that we see, but gee, to a little boy they were big and they were fun to play around in. And I used to run around and hide in there. And this particular day I was given the instruction, stay with me. And of course, what as a young boy did I do? Exactly what I wanted to. I even know now that I see my daughter doing exactly the same thing. I get the little tents inside. But I decided to run in and out of these coat racks. And I did with the big coats. It was English winter. And we do wear really big coats, or they used to in the days when I was growing up, the full-length ones, I think my grandfather always used to, I loved my grandfather, he was such a typical man. He was always going for the thing that he knew. Every time he got a new coat, it was exactly the same brand, exactly the same style as the one that he used to have. His caps were always the same. He always wore he might be a bit brave and have a blue stripe in there instead of a brown stripe, basically they were the same cap. And over all the years that I knew him in growing up, he always wore the same jacket and the same cap, just sort of renewed them. So there I was, running out in and out of these racks in between the long jackets like my grandfather used to wear. And then I came out and I couldn't see my mum. I looked and I looked and I couldn't see her. But I guess like many young children, time doesn't have much meaning. And whereas I've been thinking this had been just a few minutes, I probably have been doing it for quite a while, running in between and out of these racks because I was having such fun. And so naturally, being a big brave boy and on losing my mum, what did I start to do? I started to cry. Yes, big tough guys with tattoos. Not that I had tattoos then, they came later, but I cried. Only to be taken by some nice lady to the shop assistant. And things escalated from there, and the shop assistant called the manager. And the manager talked to someone else, and then they talked to someone else, and there's quite a band of people. And the next I know, a policeman came. And then the policeman came and said, don't worry about it, he seemed to have everything under control. And he took me and we went inside the TARDIS. Now for those of you who don't know what the TARDIS is, if you've ever watched Doctor Who, it's a blue police box. And when I was growing up, these blue police boxes were pretty well everywhere. They weren't sort of just one-offs. That every sort of town had at least 1 or 2 blue post boxes where you could either get the telephone and call the police, or I think on cold nights the policemen used to actually go inside them and keep warm. But those of us who've spent time in the United Kingdom, I won't call it England because it upsets my Scottish friends, and there's a few of them here. But they're there. Do they still have them? I think the last one I saw was at Earl's Court, which I thought was somewhat ironic because if there is one piece of Australia that sits in England, it's Earl's Court, and there in the middle of Earl's Court is the TARDIS, the blue box. I guess mobile phones have taken over from that. But anyway, so there I was whisked off to this place, and I can remember sitting there for about half an hour. And then eventually, my mum came along, looking somewhat terrified, but also relieved. May I say that I copped it. The point and the junction of anger and relief came together at that moment. It wasn't the first time I got lost. It wasn't the last time I got lost, and probably will not be the only time I get lost, although metaphorically I might get lost in different ways and in different places. I was found. And so this takes me right into this reading. That's when I read this is the experience that I bring to this story. I'm not Jesus. I wasn't wandering around the temple, but I was wandering around perhaps the temple of our age and our time, and got lost in the way. I've got to say, I'm not very happy with Jesus' response. As a parent, you know, he turns around to Mary and Joseph when he's found and says, well, didn't you expect me to be here, basically? I thought, what an obnoxious little Jesus you are. You'd get a clip around the ear if you were in our house. And the thing I like about it, it's a very human Jesus. A Jesus doing the things that all kids do, getting lost, albeit in the temple, giving parents a bit of lip. You know, as much as I like to, I think I'm very good at the discipline of my daughter. I tell you, she can still give me a bit of lip. And I guess most of you parents have never had that. All your children have been wonderful. Is that true, Sarah? You know, and so, you know, I can see that on this aspect, there is something special going on. You know, a typical mum, dad and their kid in this situation, but a very human kid. You know, Jesus, although there's this allusion to the fact that there's something greater going on, he's just a little boy that gets lost in the temple. And sometimes we try and make more of it than perhaps it should be. We try to make Jesus a bit more special in the story because we know Jesus is special. May I say to you, it is the only story about the growing up of Jesus in any of the Gospels. And it's such a brief glimpse into what is going on. And I guess we would say to ourselves, well, where would we expect to find Jesus? Obviously, like you, he was from a religious family, people who attended the temple, like you come to church. And at least we know they went once a year. They went to the temple because it says that was their observance. And they went and did this. And we know Jesus falls into this tradition. I do find it quite interesting, though, that Jesus starts off in the temple. And at the end of the ministry of Jesus in the Gospel of Luke, there is a very different attitude that's being taken, isn't there? You know, my Father's house, and yet at the end we find a Jesus that's turning over tables in the temple, getting whips and striking people out. Yes, he did that. The peace-loving Jesus, doing a bit of social action at the time. And yes, there's this incredible change in attitude. And I believe that we are given the insight into what happens. Because Jesus, like all of us, has to grow up. And it says beautifully on the end of this passage that Jesus grew in stature and wisdom. And I asked myself an interesting question on this. If he was the Son of God, why would he have to do that? Surely he had it all. But Jesus was truly human, like you and me, and had to grow up and understand the things of God. I do worry about saying that because sometimes, and in some of the churches I've been in, it does occur to me that people don't do very much growing in wisdom and stature. We get a Sunday school faith and we stay with a Sunday school faith because we are not prepared to venture and understand that the gospel doesn't start and end in one place, but the gospel is a journey. In fact, a very dangerous journey, as I said, and a treacherous journey, as I told young Isaac before. A journey that may take us into scary and difficult places. And when the gospel doesn't do that, it does cause me to ask, are we reading the right gospel? Or are we prepared to just sit on a Sunday school faith and just take it all as it comes? The challenge for us as we go out of one year into a new year is not to say we've reached our destination, but to say we are on our journey and to start to see our lives as a part of an unfolding journey. And I hate to say that to you, John and Bill, who are up there in your 90s. The journey is starting up and continues every day. We are never too old to learn. We continue to grow in wisdom and in stature. And this is told both in the Old Testament story and our New Testament story. One with the prophet, as we've read from the book of Samuel, and now as we read again in Jesus. There is a growing that needs to be done. And when the church stops realising that we need to grow, the church begins to die. I'm not very good at plants. I know Dorothy over there knows more about gardening than I'll ever know. But it seems to me when something stops growing, it shows that life is stunted. I think that's pretty true of our Christian faith, isn't it? When we stop growing, we become stunted. And when we become stunted, we can also become intransigent in the things that we believe. Life brings with us new challenges. The world is different from the world that we used to know. And we have to relate our faith to a new situation, a new paradigm, a new way. I wonder when the church became domesticated. I really do. We know for the first 300 years the church met in secret places, in homes and in different ways. There was no norm, and buildings didn't start to arise till a bit later. You know, I did think, and this is going back to my earlier conversation about churches in decline, how much energy and effort is spent on maintaining buildings, and to what effort and to what outcome. Do more people come? I don't know. It seems like the days of hundreds and hundreds of people coming into the uniting church are well and truly over. And maybe we have to ask ourselves, is our journey calling us to be and to do something different? Or wherever you happen to be coming from, if you're a visitor here today, Ross, wherever you come from, does that mean that your church has to be different? And I guess I don't want to say success is just about numbers. It certainly isn't. And growth certainly isn't about numbers. Growth is about the personal, individual thing. But it does say something when we're just holding on to the very basics of life and just keeping going because that's what we do. Surely the journey of faith should be an adventure, should be one that calls us to new and different understandings as we approach different things along the way. Having said all this, I do not know what 2016 will bring for me or for you. Let me add that I've spent a lot of time worrying about it. So for some reason I think that when we get to December the 31st, that's easy for me to say, 31st, and put our foot over into January the 1st, somehow things are magically going to change and things will become different in my life. Well, that may be so, but we carry the baggage from the past with us, most of us. Very few can leave behind the things. And somehow we've got to take the learnings of the years that have gone before with us and give us the wisdom to go on in new ways and to experience in new ways. There's a challenge for each of us. There's a challenge for us as a church, because I don't know how long the church has been sitting this way. I think probably since you remodelled. How long would that be? 10 years? And 10 years is quite a while, isn't it? That's 4 iPhones ago, 5 iPhones ago. And seriously, the world understands that you've got to keep modernising and updating things, or else people will no longer participate in what you have. But the church remains the same. The church thinks it's like God, immutable and unchanging and never-ending. Well, let me give you a word. Things are changing. The community that I came to here in 72 was a very different community that I find myself in as I approach 2016. That the values and the things that we held dear to us are not the same. We can lament the past, or we can create the future. I'm good at lamenting the past. Those who know me know that the memories live pretty hard with me, and I'm not one who forgives and forgets easily. However, the reality of the new year comes. The new journey must begin. My friends, time to shake ourselves off, and go on a new journey. Let's be brave enough as we approach 2016 to see times of change, shifting of ways, and a new perspective on the horizon.